Welcome to NSTA Web Seminars, where you can find live interactive learning at your desktop. Today's presentation is part of our series on the NGSS core ideas, and the focus today is on Earth and human activity. Our presenters are Susan Buhr Sullivan and Aida Awad, and Ted Willard is online with us from NSTA to provide information about the NGSS. My name is Bryn Slate. I'll be moderating the program. And Jeff Lehman is also with us to provide technical support. And before we jump in, just wanted to remind everybody about the NSTA Learning Center, which is your online portal for teacher professional learning and the home of over 11,100 resources, and the number does continue to go up as we add resources. Several thousand of those are free for you to access just by getting your account set up, your free account there in the Learning Center. You can add resources to your My Library area, so you can get to those at your convenience. You can find them once and then have them ready and waiting for you. You can also put your resources into collections, keep them organized by theme, and make it easy for you to go to those when you need to access them for a lesson. So collections are really a great opportunity for you to organize your resources. You can also find collections that have been made by NSTA and by other teachers like you who have put together bundles of resources around a theme. So do check out collections once you get into the Learning Center. The community forums are a great place to connect with other science teachers and share ideas and check in on any feedback on content or pedagogy that you might want to get. We do have online help from our online advisors. They are available during certain hours via our live support button, so feel free to reach out to them. They do enjoy helping you find the information that you're looking for there in the Learning Center. I also want to mention that we do have free tools that can help you plan your professional learning and document your progress toward your goals. So check it out by going to learningcenter.nsta.org. Now I'll go ahead and introduce our presenters. First, we will hear from Ted Willard, who will talk to us about the development of NGSS, and he's going to help facilitate our Q&A as well. And then our featured presenters are Susan Buhr Sullivan from the University of Colorado, and Aida Awad is president of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers, and she's also a teacher science department chair there in Illinois. So at this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Ted to get things started. Welcome, Ted.
Thanks very much, Bryn. Thanks, everyone, to have you all here. We're really looking forward to this evening. I know it gets really busy between Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I know it's great to have you and spending some time to get a little deeper understanding of the NGSS. So basically, and some of you have seen this before, but looking at the next generation science standards were developed by 4 organizations. You've got the National Academies, Achieve, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and my favorite, NSTA. And the standards were sort of developed in a 2-step process. There was first the development of the framework for K-12 science education, and that led to the standards, and then all the different elements, assessments, curriculum, instruction, teacher professional development. All of that comes as a result of the standards, will be influenced by the standards. Starting point here is the framework itself, and so to get a sense of what the framework is about, we'll take a minute here. That the big deal is the 3 dimensions of science education, that there's scientific and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and disciplinary core ideas. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those. If you haven't had a chance to read the framework yet, I strongly, 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 can't stress it enough, encourage you to go and read it. There's no real excuse not to. It's you can get a free PDF from the National Academies, or if you want one in print, if you want to, it's a great, bedside reading, or if you're going to the beach, I guess it's a little late in the year for that, but sitting in on a snowy day and reading. So we have the 8 practices listed here, things like asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations, using mathematics, engaging in argument. All of these different elements are examples of different practices, and these are the things that scientists do, to gain an understanding of the world around them, the things that students will do to gain an understanding of the world around them. If you want to see more about the practices, as Brent has mentioned, there was a whole series of web seminars about them you can check out. Next are the cross-cutting concepts. These are things that aren't unique to physics or to chemistry or biology, but cut across all the science disciplines. So patterns, scale, systems, structure and function, these different elements here. And again, last spring we had a series of web seminars about each of these cross-cutting concepts. And then that brings us to the core ideas. Earlier this fall we talked about the physical sciences. We're now in the midst of the earth and space sciences. We're talking tonight about earth and human activity. And so each of these disciplines breaks down into further detail, and it goes even then further detail down, as we'll get into tonight on the earth and human activity section. So all of that was outlined in the framework, and then you have the standards themselves. The standards were developed by a group of 26 states working with Achieve to sort of organize the whole process. Here are the list of the lead state partners who were involved in making that. And then we go on to, oops, skipped over something here, clicked too fast. There were 41 writers spread across the country. That gives a little dot for each of the writers of NGSS. About half of the writers were teachers at the time they got involved in it. Some of them have moved on to other positions in their districts, but that was their starting point. A lot of input was taken throughout the process. Currently, 8 states have adopted NGSS, the ones in green here. The yellow have taken some sort of step in the State Department of Education, or the State Board of Education has gone through to look into it, and more are expected down the road. Let's take a closer look at what the standards are like. And so you can see that there's this performance expectation. Develop molecular models of reactants and products to support the explanation that atoms and therefore mass are conserved in a chemical reaction. Now I want to note this, what we've got in this box down here, that we've got a performance expectation that combines these different elements together, but it is describing what is to be assessed at the end of instruction. It's not going forth and saying to students, this is what you, or to teachers I should say, this is what you have to do in class. A lot of choices can be made. But let's see how that particular performance expectation is a blend of these different elements here. We've got developing models to support an explanation. We've got reactants and products, and the idea of atoms and mass are conserved in chemical reactions. That's brought up down here in the core ideas. And then this idea of conservation, that matter is conserved, because atoms are conserved in physical and chemical processes, is a cross-cutting concept. And so this statement blends those 3 different elements together and is a method of assessing students' understanding not just of content, but also their ability to engage in practices and understanding of practices and their understanding of cross-cutting concepts. Where again, a lot of different choices could be made in how teachers would go about getting students to have these understandings so they'd be prepared for those assessments. With that in place, I want to turn things over to Susan and Aida and hear what they have to say about Earth and human activity. To you folks.
All right. Well, thank you, Ted, and thank you, Bryn. We are happy to be here, Aida and myself. I'm also gratified to see people coming in, and many of whom I know. So I'm glad we have such a nice big group, and I can already see that people are interactive, so that's great. I'm Susan Buhr Sullivan. I'm an atmospheric chemist by training, and I am director of the CIRES Education and Outreach Group. CIRES is an environmental sciences research group. We're a NOAA cooperative institute. And through our outreach and education activities, we've been involved in education around these ideas since 1996, these and related ideas. A big focus of the work that we've done over the last several years is about climate science, and so that's one of the things we've chosen to focus on in this presentation. I'm joined by Aida Awad. Aida is the current president of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers, which includes resources for K-12 teachers, workshops, all kinds of resources for geoscience education. And Aida is also responsible for supporting the teachers within her district and department in Park Ridge, Illinois. So we're going to be switching off on this presentation. You'll hear from me for a while, and then Aida will jump in and present the next part, and then we'll switch back. So a number of you have been on, I think it was 15 or more seminars about the standards, or in general. So I just want to briefly outline some of the opportunities that are afforded by the standards. In this framework, Earth and Space Science has parity with life science and physical science concepts. So that's a big opportunity for those of us who are interested in geoscience education. As Ted pointed out, the big news is about integration, not just content, but also the science and engineering practices and calling out the cross-cutting themes. There's a special place for these ideas, these Earth and human activity ideas, for engineering and design. And I had a conversation with Mike Weissession, who was one of the lead writers for Earth and Space Science. He said they really shine in these ideas. They really come to the forefront. And that's pretty important, because we're talking about how do we, in part, what are these ideas and how do we respond to the implications. They have some challenges inherent. Anytime you talk about human impacts on the environment, it can be an emotional topic for students. There are political complexities and social complexities, because these ideas are so relevant to humans and to our way of life. We know there's a lot of challenges in that there are new ideas here. There are not just ready-to-go resources. Some of the concepts are new. And we know it's going to take a large community effort by everybody, professional developers, teachers, districts, the science community, curriculum developers. I don't know if I said that, but the whole bunch of people who are interested in science education are going to need to be working together to really meet this vision. Okay, so this is where you use your pencil that Bryn mentioned. I'd like you to do two things. One is to let us know where we're starting on this set of ideas. If this is your first learning experience with Earth and human activity ideas in NGSS, then mark down here at the top. If you know what the ideas are, you know where they are, you can describe them for your grade. You can describe the ideas at grades above and below yours, and you know how practices and cross-cutting themes are integrated across those ideas, then you're at a 4. And if you have written into this already with your pencil, you can please also write into the chat, give us one idea or some question that you have about these ideas in NGSS, and that'll give us a sense of where we're starting.
Thanks, Susan, and I'll just jump in to remind those who might be using a mobile device, such as a smartphone or tablet, that the screen marking tools aren't available to you, so please just go ahead and type into the chat and give us your feedback there.
Okay, so wow, so there's a wide range. What's nice about this large of a group is that I can expect there to be a lot of things said. Okay, so weather is not the same as climate. That's something that Joseph knows about this. And what other questions do you have? Lucy is at the 2. I'm guessing Lucy is on a mobile device. Anything else that you'd like to tell us about? your ideas on Earth and human activity. Okay, you cover global warming. It's good to know. Good. And you know that global warming is part of this? Yes, it is. Okay. Some have learned about NGSS in school that haven't taught it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of conversation about teaching climate and strategies that teachers may want to use because of the social complexity. Oh, nice. So there's a lot here. I see a lot of the input in the chat is about climate change. We'll do a little bit at the end of this presentation about strategies for teaching climate change and the sensitivity that a person mentioned about teachers may be concerned about it. Okay, so a lot coming in. Good. So it looks like there's a full range. A lot of people are saying that this is their first or close to first learning experience with Earth and human activity in NGSS, and then it ranges upward from there. So good to see. Excellent. Thank you for interacting in that way, and thank you for typing into the chat about that. This was where I was going to ask you that, but I decided to make it part of that previous one. So the big themes that we're talking about in this talk are, first of all, how do these ideas build on each other through the grades? So where are you starting K-5? Where do you get to in high school? These progress in sophistication, especially through the idea of thinking about systems. As students go on, they're able to do more, synthesize more, and Aida and I will talk about that. You're building on practices through the grades, especially for these ideas, problem solving. That can be about engineering, it can be about design more broadly. And also because there is so much interest in climate science, we are taking for our examples resources and ideas that are around the climate ideas and what I'm calling pre-climate, foundational ideas that will then build into an understanding of climate and related topics. We wish we could talk about everything, but time is finite. We will be showing you a lot of resources, referring to a lot of organizations as we go through. The citations and sources for all of those resources are on the last slide. I also sent Bryn a handout, which I think she can push out to you, which contains those citations. Okay, so this is my attempt at showing on one slide the progression of ideas or topics. I just pulled from a word or catchphrase from the performance expectations to try and capture that across the grades as you go up. There's a couple of things to notice about this. First of all, in grades kindergarten through 5, the main ideas are in natural resources, natural hazards, and in human impacts. Climate change does not come into it until you get into middle school, when students are able to think more about larger scale systems, deeper time, more interdisciplinary and interactive systems. The other thing I want you to notice is that, I'll talk a little bit more about this, you jump, if you look at this, from kindergarten through 3rd grade. The next, all these 3 occur in kindergarten, the next time it occurs in 3rd grade. It doesn't mean that that students are not working with ideas in science or related to this in 1st and 2nd grade. What it means is that these K through 5 are conceived by the writers as an integrated whole. So younger students are working across the DCIs and into other science concepts. In K through 5, students are working on their foundations. And I'll say more about that in a later slide. In middle school, they're able to start synthesizing these, doing more systems thinking, and understanding ideas conceptually and in an integrated fashion. In high school, students are able to start doing more quantitative work. according to the performance expectations. So that's what you'll see as we go through resources. We'll be seeing how things build on each other. As I mentioned before, we're focusing on these ideas where there's a circle, and natural resources are still important, but we've chosen, some progressions through the grades to highlight, just because we can't do everything. Okay, so here are a few of the things to think about. Thanks, Brenda. It was hard to make that summary slide. Didn't know how to put it all in one slide, but I'm glad it worked. Here's a few things to look at. First of all, these are performance guides. They are not instructional guides. That means that the description is what students can do. It's not a day-to-day description of what you are doing in the classroom. People are working on that, but there's a lot of work to be done. I'm sorry to see that people are losing audio. Is that a widespread problem?
Hi, Susan. That's
okay.
A couple of folks just have a lag in their due to their own connection, but it's only a couple of individuals, so go ahead and keep moving.
Okay. Let me know if I need to go into the phone at some point, but I think I'm fine. Okay. Another thing to point out is that even though the practices, the performance expectations give one practice, such as ask questions, the presumption is that students are using practices throughout every day, so that it's not a challenge to them to use one of the practices for the performance expectation. And we'll talk more about how practices can build with these ideas through the grades. Another thing to notice is that the unit of sharing is no longer really the activity level. It's more units and bundles of units. You can reach these ideas, but you're building through time, you're bundling performance expectations and having deep integrated learning experiences so that things are cohesive. Lastly, we'll be pointing out some of the common core alignments, since that's on a lot of people's minds right now as everyone tries to figure out how to implement Common Core. There's a lot of richness here that can really be brought out with Common Core. So for this slide, I want to recognize Don Duganhouse. I pulled from Don's writings this idea of bottomless ideas at multiple depths, and that's really where to think as you're looking through the grades. Also, Don has done a great job of pulling out some of the big ideas in Earth system science, namely that we use models and maps to understand geoscience. There's linkages with physical and physical sciences that drive the changes in our systems. We're connected to life. We influence the environment influences us. The flow of energy and the fact that Earth is a system of systems. These are all very big ideas that would be revisited time and time again at different levels through the grades. You can see through here how students may explore an idea in Earth and human activity in increasing sophistication, using increasingly sophisticated practices. So for example, if you want students to describe or use a model or give a model of the greenhouse effect, one way they can do that is through a drawing. That's a form of a model. It's a simplified representation of the Earth system, and this is an example from some 7th graders from Dan Shepherdson's work. You might want use a simplified simulation such as Daisy Ball, where you are understanding how albedo can change temperature and temperature can change populations. You can start getting into that with this kind of simplified model or simulation, and then you can go into quite sophisticated models such as the educational global climate global change model and all of the complexity there. So you can really build on this through the years and in your class. And along with that, the standards are asking questions like, how do humans reduce the impacts of weather hazards? At a K-5 level, you might be asking students to design ways that they are reduce impacts of weather. Here's an example of Inuit snow goggles. You can ask questions like, how do we do that in Tucson? How do we reduce impacts of weather in Tucson? How do we do that in Colorado? Different climates, different design solutions. Here's what is my favorite picture in the entire world right now. And it helps to, it's an example of how we use energy and minimize the effects on the environment. This is a electricity producing merry-go-round in Ghana, which then powers lights that students use to study by. So that's an increasingly sophisticated design. And then at the end, if you want to talk about how do communities use science ideas at a higher level, that's one of the performance expectations to reduce impacts. Here's an example from the 2011 Airport of the Future competition. This is a very sophisticated design of an airport that uses tidal power in the Thames in London to power the airport. But just increasingly sophisticated design ideas, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, are there any questions at this point? I just want to stop a couple of times. Thanks, Aida, for putting the resource in.
Yep. Yeah, so if anyone has questions here, they can write them down in the chat. There are some people interested in knowing about who had coined bottomless ideas at multiple depths, so I think Aida's answered that by giving a reference to Don Dugganhouse. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I pulled that from Don's stuff, and that citation is at the end of on the last slide.
Great.
Okay.
And as Prince noting, the other pieces will be here. Give you one more chance here for any questions. And we've seen none right now. People feel free to write something down there, but we'll go ahead and we'll get to any of the questions you have at the next question break.
Okay.
So go ahead,
you'll have a couple,
Susan.
Okay. You'll have a couple of options for asking questions. So K-5, I mentioned that even though there's some gaps here, this is really an integrated set of performance expectations and standards. Here you would be looking at related standards in the rest of Earth and Space Science. You'd be looking at physical science and life science and looking for ways to connect those. When I look at this, these are the DCIs, the core ideas, and I see a lot of things that kind of daunt me at first. For example, this one here at the kindergarten level is about preparing for severe weather, and when I think about kindergartners, I think, really? Severe weather? It's important for kindergartners to know what's happening in their own place. But I think that what I like about moving from these DCIs and talking about the potential hazards, reducing impact of natural hazards, all of these kind of really big things, I like to look at the performance expectations, which pretty much flips these topics from being all about impact and hazard, and also importantly how we rely on the environment, how we affect the environment, all important ideas. But the performance expectations flip those ideas and have it be about doing problem solving, talking about reducing impact, and talking about what do we do about these things. I think that that is an important aspect, especially at these K through 5 levels. At K through 5, students should be learning the foundations. They should be learning how to work within these systems. the idea that they can interact with these systems and make changes themselves that reduce impact, those are all really important at this grade level. Okay, so their beginning understanding of the ideas. In the earlier grades, the performance expectations are all about recognizing patterns and formulating answers to questions. By the end of 5th grade, that has become more sophisticated, and students at that age are then demonstrating proficiency at gathering, describing, and using the information. So it's a deeper engagement with information and with the ideas. Another thing to note about the design practices at earlier grades, students aren't necessarily coming up with an original design ideas. Original design ideas are welcome, but they're not necessarily generating them themselves. And as you go on, students are doing more generation themselves. Okay, so here's a look at natural hazards. These are a paraphrase of the performance expectations K through 4 about natural hazards. Students are asking questions to obtain information about forecasting severe weather. They're at a higher grade, they're generating and comparing multiple solutions that reduce impacts of natural hazards, and they are designing solutions to reduce impacts. There's a few places that I like to look for elementary level weather and pre-climate foundational ideas. The main places I like to look are at the sister projects beyond weather and the water cycle, and the sister project beyond penguins and polar bears. One of the reasons this book here, the Kids Book of Weather Forecasting, is an example resource from those projects. This is a resource kids can use to build a weather station. You might have them first ask what kind of weather should we be monitoring or doing forecasting about here in our climate. The other thing I like about these projects is that the literacy connections to science are first and foremost. So if you go to these places, you will find not only hands-on activities and professional trade books that you can use, but you'll find ways to use them in literacy, and to meet the common core connections, which for these performance expectations, it's ask and answer questions about text, ask clarifying questions. I'm also showing here the design loop for engineering. And the thing that makes engineering different than tinkering is analysis. So as part of the design loop, you don't just identify a problem and say, okay, let's do this. You explore information, you analyze it, you select ideas, you treat it more deeply. A loop like this and other engineering examples that you can use for these ideas you can find on Teach Engineering, and that link is on the last slide. Teach Engineering is a digital collection of engineering resources for school children. Okay, K through 5, one of the big idea areas is human impacts. Again, a paraphrase of the performance expectations. Students are communicating solutions to reduce the impact of humans on the environment. They're obtaining and combining information about how communities use science to protect the environment. There are design aspects, engineering aspects of these performance expectations, and if you look at them, you can see that some of them are technological. They may say something like, make a claim about a technology, or they have the word technology in them. Others are more broad. So there's lots of ways you can look at this. For example, say the question was about the environmental impacts of agriculture, and the fact that so much of food is shipped from elsewhere and thus has a large emissions that has emissions involved with it or whatever it is. You could look at that technologically. You could and talk about more efficient transportation systems. You could look at it more broadly and talk about local foodways or school gardens, things like that. There's a couple of projects I want to highlight here. One is Young Voices for the Planet. And if you go there, you will find lots of resources about how students, young adults, down to this girl here, Olivia, is 11, are taking actions around human impacts on the environment. This is a pretty rich resource and one that I enjoy a lot. This is also a great place where you can get students involved in school energy initiatives or school recycling initiatives, water resource, using water more wisely, those kinds of things. So here I've highlighted the Green Schools Initiative. Currently they have a couple of what they call challenges going on, which is about increasing recycling at school and also energy use at school, bringing that down. If you want to have students be communicating about what they're doing, there's also a video challenge that's part of those initiatives, and it's a great program and great people, so something to look into. Okay, so before we move to the middle grades and high school, I want to give another opportunity for questions.
All right. So we had a number of people who were wanting to double check that the resources you were showing there, asking whether they were freely available or whether there's a cost associated with them as a starting point. All the resources, all the resources that I've been showing, I know the projects are free. I don't know if the Kids Can book, the weather forecasting book, is free or not. All the resources that Aida will be showing are definitely free, and so is the Green Cup Challenge. All right, very good. We've got Bob here who's asking about the time folks are having to teach science, and what has been your experience and what the teachers that you're working with in teaching science at the K-5 level?
Right. You know, I work with a lot of different teachers. Most of the teachers I work with are at the middle and high school level. I do work with teachers at the upper elementary grades. But I don't think it's representative who I'm working with. I think that some of what I've seen that works is doing instruction that is cross-purpose. So, for example, we know that at the K-5 level, the big news is about literacy, it's about numeracy, but kids have to have something to be literate and have new quantitative reasoning about. So the people I've seen who get it into their classroom the most are doing things cross-purpose. So maybe kids are reading about science, maybe they're using math about science questions. I know it's something that is going to need a lot of work and a lot of direction from administrators and a lot of support from the science community to really meet this vision.
Very good, thanks. I think we've got a number of good little conversations here. People excited about the resources you've shown, and a little bit of talking about some of the occasional points about the political challenges and some of these topic areas. But I think we've answered folks' questions for now. We can go on and continue at this point.
Okay, well with that, we're going to switch over to Aida. So Aida, take it away.
Susan. I just want to check and make sure everybody can hear me okay. So at this point, we're going to deal with both middle school and high school here before the next question break. So I want to start out by saying that the goal for this next section of the webinar is to continue to examine the progression of student learning through middle school and high school grades that focus on earth and human activity. And we're going to do that again by continuing to consider the disciplinary core ideas, which I'm probably going to end up calling big ideas a lot of the time. So please listen for that language, performance expectations, and then their alignment back to the Common Core State Standards that we're all so interested in talking about. So let's start here by looking at the disciplinary core ideas and the big ideas for the middle school grades, so grades 6 through 8. And here we're going to continue to focus on the big ideas related specifically to the natural hazards, global climate change, and human impacts on Earth systems. So let's start with natural hazards. And here I think you can see the strong connections back to the elementary grade levels and the big ideas there, with students now starting to do things like forecast future events. And these are, of course, supported by them studying what's happened with some of the past events. So again, we're going to see a progression from the earlier grades in the ideas related to global climate change, where at the middle school level, the focus is on developing an understanding around the concept that human activities are factors in global warming. So that's kind of a new one. We came from the elementary level where we were thinking about weather and severe weather and those kinds of things to this realization that the human activities are factors. What we do is a factor in global warming. And that reducing their impact depends on the students' understandings of things like climate science, engineering capabilities, and on being able to apply the knowledge of these areas in a wise fashion. Let's take a second here and look at the human impacts on Earth systems, where here we can see that the focus is on recognizing that human activities play more of an integral role in changes in the biosphere. So here we're crossing over into life science, and that they can have both positive and negative impacts. And also the idea that as human population and as the consumption of resources both increase, so can those negative impacts. That is, of course, unless we're able to engineer them otherwise. So there will be a big focus here on designing possible solutions and testing them in a variety of different ways. So let's go ahead and move forward to look at some of these performance expectations and see how the big ideas are reflected in those performance expectations. So at the elementary level, if we think back, the action words that we heard Susan talking about in the performance expectations were things like generate and compare solutions, making claims, asking questions, obtaining information, communicating some possible design solutions. And here we move to the middle school level, where students are continuing to think about those things and demonstrate that they can do those things, but also skills and understanding should move on to analyzing and interpreting data. So more of a quantitative approach already, to predicting and forecasting natural hazards, and to developing technologies that can help to mitigate their effects. So if we look here at global climate change, the students should be posing questions that serve to clarify multiple lines of evidence of the factors that are causing increases in global temperatures, specifically over the past century in this performance expectation. And then moving on to human impacts on the Earth systems, we're progressing to being able to apply scientific principles to the design process to monitor and minimize human impacts on the environment, and to constructing arguments. So here's, I think, the first time the word argument is really used, and we're going to see that word a lot as we move through the performance expectations for middle school and for high school. So those arguments, of course, have to be supported by evidence for, in this case, how increases in population and the consumption of natural resources impact Earth systems. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to think about the disciplinary core ideas, the performance expectations, let's just take a second here to kind of summarize what the landscape of NGSS is really looking like at the middle school level. So some of the big storyline ideas, if you will. And I want you to keep in mind, as you're thinking about your own practice and the practice of your peers, and what you're learning here in this webinar and as you continue to dive into NGSS, And maybe think about keeping a handy list of some of the points in the storyline and kind of a checklist as you go through and think about where students are coming from in the earlier grades and where they are going in the grades beyond the grade level that you're working with them. So at the middle school level, there's an overall emphasis on ideas, on knowledge and solutions, and these knowledge and solutions are things that cut across the life sciences, physical sciences, and earth and space sciences. So it's definitely an integrated approach. It's built around some concepts like cause and effect, like identifying patterns, stability and change, things that have students demonstrating their proficiency through the use of things like questioning, constructing explanations, analyzing and interpreting data, engaging in scientific argument, developing and using models, and designing solutions. So we're getting a long list here of ways that students are going to be demonstrating their proficiency and language that we're going to see in the performance expectations. So let's go ahead and jump forward and take a look at some of the curricular resources and kind of exemplars here. So we're going to start with global climate change at the middle school level. And the performance expectations are kind of summarized here or paraphrased here along with some of the connections to Common Core. So the performance expectations for global climate change put an emphasis on asking questions to clarify evidence that shows that the role of human activities in the rise of global temperatures is real. And examples of human activities that play a role include things like burning fossil fuels, agricultural activity, producing building materials. So some of the types of evidence that students might be considering, they might be taking a look at as evidence are things like tables and graphs, definitely maps that might show temperatures, levels of atmospheric gases, rates of human activities. All of those kinds of things are going to give students an opportunity to ask questions and to formulate arguments about global climate change. So the exemplar that I've chosen to show here, which is definitely an open source free resource, comes from NASA's My NASA data collection. And in this particular activity, students integrate what they learned in the previous grade levels with physical science and other big earth science ideas. And this particular activity asks students to begin with a journaling focus prompt that ties global climate change to things like ocean temperatures, ocean currents, the overall flow of heat on the planet, and with a mapping activity where students depict patterns of heat flow. So I think you can see that the students would really be off to a good start here in starting to ask some questions about these patterns and trends that they're seeing in the evidence and in the data. In the next part of this activity, students use real-time satellite data for different regions of the globe, and they piece together through kind of a jigsaw, if you will, a global picture of ocean currents, of wind patterns, and ultimately of sea surface temperatures. And then with this information, students can start to ask questions, they can start to make predictions about changes in temperature, and they can make these predictions and ask questions about how these things change over time. So starting to see some emphasis on changes over time, which of course get us into forecasting and making predictions. So let's take a quick look back here at the big ideas this lesson was focused around and see if we've kind of ticked all the boxes. So the idea of identifying and clarifying evidence that would pertain to an argument students would make as a result of this lesson, I think we got that one. Asking questions about evidence, I think we've had lots of opportunities for students to do that in this kind of a lesson. And then applying scientific knowledge to real-world phenomena. And I think that through looking at that data, they'll be able to do that as well. Down at the bottom right corner of the slide, you can see some of the connections to the Common Core state standards, such as citing evidence, reasoning abstractly and quantitatively, and understanding and using variables from data sets. So it looks like we've been able to focus in on a couple of the English language arts and a couple of the mathematics standards as well. So let's go ahead and move on to another example here, and this is the human impacts on our systems. So the performance expectations, again, are paraphrased up in the top right. And here we see that there's an emphasis on students examining human use and impacts, in this case on water and land usage and on pollution. So as part of this performance expectation, students should be able to examine the impacts of humans on their environment, and then to assess the kinds of solutions that might be possible, and ultimately to design solutions and evaluate their effectiveness. So a couple of really important components there: to design those solutions using the design process, and to go back and evaluate how effective they might be. Students should also be able to use evidence such as data showing maybe consumption rates of natural resources that are indicative of human activities, things that would change the appearance or the composition or the structure of Earth systems, and that they impact the rate of those changes within the systems. And I think you can see that there's another big idea that comes into play here, and that's the whole idea of cause and effect, and specifically of causation. It is important to start having students inspect and make statements about. So we have another lesson here shown, and this is a lesson that comes from the Carbon Mitigation Initiative at Princeton University. It's called the Stabilization Wedge Game. And the way this works, as shown here, you've got students who are going to examine the scale of the greenhouse gas problem, and they're going to consider technologies that are already available that could help us reduce carbon emissions that are altering our systems. So the students choose between the different strategies. As you can see, some of them there: nuclear, carbon capture and storage, solar electricity. They choose which of the strategies they would like to add to this game, and then they justify and support their choices as the game goes forward. And you can see that by adding more and more of these wedges, it's a really great visual for students to be able to see how their own behavior choices have an impact on the impacts on our systems. So it's very visual, but it's also rich in terms of getting students to understand what options are already in existence with technologies that we have today. So once again, we have to think about some of the alignment to the Common Core standards, and here you see that students have to be able to research multiple possible solutions. Each one of those wedges would be a different possible solution, and evaluate the relationships between those solutions and back to the problems, and to use data to construct arguments that would support the use of the strategies that they selected in this stabilization wedges game. So it looks like this is another lesson that's pretty well aligned with those Common Core and certainly speaks to the performance expectations of NGSS. So moving forward, one more to take a look at here at the middle school level, and that's related to natural hazards, where the performance expectation focuses on students being able to predict future natural hazard events and to consider technologies that might mitigate the impact of these future events. Students should be able to inspect evidence of past events and recognize that some types of natural hazards are characterized by precursors that enable their prediction. This, of course, would include things like using satellite data to track those severe weather events that they studied when they were in elementary school, and do things like monitor for earthquake swarms leading up to a volcanic eruption, or study data related to ongoing natural hazards, some things that we sometimes don't think about, such as sea level rise, as being something that would be considered as a natural hazard. The format of the data that the students would be analyzing and interpreting, again, might be tables, it might be graphs, would probably be maps, images, video, and so on. So the tool in this case that I selected to share with you, it's not a lesson, it's a tool instead. It's called Surging Seas, and it comes from Climate Central. Climate Central is an independent organization of scientists and journalists who research and report on climate change data. The Surging Seas tool gives students access to data that they need to explore rising sea levels in over about 3,000 coastal communities in the United States. They simply type in the name of the city and zip code, and they pull up this data. So there are images, there are maps, there are graphs that show future trends, and then there are also bubbles that will give them links to some more resources and some more information as they start to formulate questions and want to dig in a little bit further to that material. So once again, I think you can see here we've got some strong connections to the Common Core, both the English language arts and the math standards. So that is a quick tour through the middle school information, and at this point we're going to go ahead and progress up to the high school level. We'll look at this as the core ideas and the performance expectations, and then we'll look at some curricular resources as well. And I think it's interesting to think about the high school level, if you're teaching middle school, if you're teaching elementary school, or if you're teaching high school, as being kind of a capstone level of the next generation science standards ideas around Earth and human activity. And really the big ideas and the performance expectations here, as Susan said earlier, are where the ideas of the science and engineering practices, of designing solutions, and of making connections through the cross-cutting concepts, the life sciences and the physical sciences, these things really shine through here. So I think it's important that regardless of what grade level students you're working at, that you're aware of these kind of capstone ideas and that we're all working to support at some foundation level or another students being able to get to these higher level ideas. So as we move through this particular grade level segment, let's keep in mind what we've talked about already through the elementary and the middle schools and the progressions that students should be able to do from those lower grade bands up into middle and high school. Definitely you see the scaffolding and the alignment between each of these things. And it's also a really great way to engage your professional learning communities in some conversations about the progression through the standards here. So let's look at the big ideas here related to natural hazards, to global climate change, and human impacts on the Earth systems at this level. Students are really engaged now in some strong social science and ethical components as they look at these big ideas, and we'll talk about them as we go through them. And I think there's definitely an invitation, if you will, to really engage in a deep way with the ideas here at the high school level, that students are invited to consider that humans have the ability to model, to predict, and to manage the impacts that they're having. And those are some ways to kind of get past the doom and gloom of what's happening with the environment. And so they can talk about ways to use new discoveries and new technologies to make a difference in the impacts that human activities are having on our systems, and to make some connections across to life science and to the other physical sciences. So let's look at how the big ideas have progressed in the area of human impacts on the Earth systems next. An important idea really surfaces here that helps students focus on their futures, and that's the idea of sustainability. I think that's the first time we've seen that word here of sustainability. And students are still expected to be able to examine and analyze multiple lines of evidence to predict future events and to propose and evaluate possible solutions as they did in middle school. And now they're also expected to be working with simulations and models that really emphasize sustainability across systems and start to include some very specific language about considering biodiversity as they move forward. So that's a couple of really key big words here with sustainability and biodiversity entering the picture. Okay, so moving forward and taking a quick look at the specific performance expectations at high school level. The elementary and middle school levels had action words like generate and compare solutions, make claims, ask questions, obtain information, start to communicate some possible solutions, starting to analyze and interpret data, making some predictions, And now here at the high school level, we see students progressing on to constructing explanations based on multiple lines of evidence, on analyzing data and models, forecasting changes and rates of change, using mathematical models to demonstrate relationships. You can see some real strong connections here to the Common Core as well, to doing things like creating computational simulations to illustrate relationships between components of systems and evaluating and refining solutions now. So now we've had a chance to consider the disciplinary core ideas and the performance expectations at the high school level. Let's kind of look forward to the big storyline and what is the landscape really like here at the high school level of these capstone performance expectations. So as you think about your practice and aligning your curriculum to NGSS, keep that big picture storyline in mind. Keep the progression through the grades in mind. And I think that you'll agree here that the expectations for students to be able to demonstrate their learning cuts across not only the sciences, but also depends on their being able to demonstrate mastery in English language arts and mathematics. So it's really an integrated approach that's built around concepts of cause and effect, around things like stability and change, definitely systems and system models, where students are really getting good at using computational thinking and argument to understand the interdependencies between humans and Earth systems and to propose some sustainable solutions that are really grounded in evidence. So I think we're ready to look forward at 3 of the curricular exemplars here. The first one here is on global climate change. And here the performance expectations talk about global climate change, taking an emphasis on analyzing multiple lines of evidence to make predictions based on climate data, on models across the life, earth sciences, and physical sciences. And the data models might focus on things like precipitation or temperature, atmospheric gases, and would show things like relationships with sea level, sea ice, ocean compositions, glacial ice volumes. And students, of course, are starting to do more in terms of identifying not only the components of those systems, but also changes and rates of change within the systems. So at the high school level, the students are expected to be able to show mathematical models that illustrate those relationships, but also how do the human activities modify the relationships between the components of the systems. Again, this would include different types of systems like systems in the hydrosphere, atmosphere, geosphere, biosphere, and I guess cryosphere as well. And students should be able to identify the inputs and outputs for systems and the variables that are used in the various models that they'll be examining. So a really nice place to take a look at some lessons for global climate change is a resource that's called the Earth Exploration Toolbook. It's a collection of lessons. This particular one that I'm showing here is a chapter that's called Wither Sea Ice. And the activity is really multidimensional, and it begins with students being introduced to this community of Churchill, Canada. And later on in the activity, students use something like either Google Earth or ImageJ, which is an image visualization tool, both of which are open source, so they're free, to investigate the patterns and the trends in Arctic sea ice coverage over about the past 30 years or so. And the students export the data into a spreadsheet. They take a look at the trends there, and it's a very rich activity that takes them start to finish through looking at what's happening with these communities and then the impact of the sea ice changes. So down in the bottom corner, again, you can see strong connections to the Common Core. And we're going to go ahead and move on to human impacts on the Earth's systems. Here we've got another open source online tool. This tool is called FieldScope, and it comes from the National Geographic Education team of Danny Edelson's there. Here the performance expectations are focusing on students being able to create a computational simulation using the relationships between things like human populations, biodiversity, and resource management. And this means that students are going to be considering areas of change and rates of change relative to things like agricultural efficiencies, consumption rates, waste management, urban planning, and in this particular case, conservation efforts. So the FieldScope tool that's shown here is actually an online geographic information system. This particular one looks at Biscayne Bay and does a BioBlitz, where students can go in and they can view mapped data, both marine and terrestrial data, and then some of the bathymetric data, and they can look at species observations and concentrations of species in specific areas of the environment. There are also links out to other parts of information and data from those particular map areas. So it's a very rich tool. There are several other regions of the United States that are covered there as well. And then let's go ahead and move on to the natural hazards slide. So this will be the last one that we'll talk about here in high school. And here the performance expectations have students constructing an explanation based, again, on multiple lines of evidence that establishes a cause and effect relationship and that connects the changes in human activity to natural hazards, changes in the climate, and to the availability of resources. So some of the changes in human activity that might be looked at here would be sea level rises, hurricanes, other severe weather, things like regional temperature and precipitation pattern changes, and the resulting impacts those might have on agriculture or on raising livestock. So here you can see another way to deliver content is through a game format. Lots of talk about gaming out there. And in this case, there's a mobile game format called Rescue 406. And this makes use of some of the satellite technologies and data that NOAA has in looking at natural hazards and calls for help, and has students doing some simulations around those. So I think we've covered quite a bit of material here as we've kind of flown through middle school and high school through the big ideas and the performance expectations and some examples, and I think it's time to pause here and take a couple of questions. So I don't know, Ted, if you've been keeping track of questions there. I know there are quite a few of them.
We've had a bunch of different pieces here. Some discussion going on. I'd be interested in your view on this. Matthias has asked, is there a valid example of model-based, quote, computational thinking to analyze relationships between Earth systems, in quotes? And I'm not totally sure if I understand fully what he's asking here. Maybe it rings bells more with you. But what occurred to me is I do know that there's some work now in actually, for example, climate models for high school students, taking some very simplified early history models and adapting them for school use. And I thought you all would know more about that than I do.
So I think my response is, I'm not sure either if I'm really understanding the question completely the way it was stated, but I think my response would be that it's always a good idea to try to keep things a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more simple. So I think the intent here of the performance expectations is that, and the assessment boundaries listed in them too, is that there are multiple different examples that students might be able to look at. So pick one of them and try to pull in some data and some models and trends from one of those. So an easy one would be something like sea level rise, where there's a lot of data for a lot of different geographic areas, or Arctic sea ice, where there's readily available data from things like the NSIDC. And to take some of that more readily available data and to try to model that through looking at it in a variety of different ways and starting to pull some of the data out, put it into charts and graphs, and build some trend lines there. And I think that's the kind of approach that it will probably be most effective.
That,
I hope
that
that
sounds great.
That question a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good value. And there's a lot of discussion here about the use of statistics, particularly at middle school. And I don't know if you want to give any sort of share any of your thoughts about, to what degree can students use statistics and what types of statistics at different grade levels?
Mm-hmm. I think in my experience in working with teachers both at the middle school level and at the high school level, that a lot of that depends on how the particular statistics are presented. So, you can picture an Excel spreadsheet full of data, but you could also picture distilling that down into a very straightforward bar graph or some other visual that will allow students to say something about the trends in the data. So there are certainly degrees to which they need to be able to actually look at the data, go in and do some calculations with it, versus being able to look at a more visual representation, a more conceptual representation of that data and make sense out of the trends, start to ask questions, start to argue different ideas and come up with some possible solutions based on those more conceptual understandings that they have initially of the data at the earlier grade levels. So it has to be a progression, as we've talked about from the start. We're progressing in these skills, and the math and the English language arts are progressing along with student sophistication in looking at evidence and looking at data. And I think I would say, too, that in the last 10 or so years of working with teachers, that specifically working with science teachers, there is more of a concern about actually doing some more computational, doing some more quantitative thinking, and moving away from some of the more conceptual thinking. So I think that's the right track that we need to be on, that we need to have hard evidence, and that would be where I would suggest people start to think, how can you take that quantitative material and make it more palatable, make it something that students can start to feel comfortable with, making statements about trends.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we can, and unless another question pops up here in another couple seconds, I think we can go on.
Great.
Go for it.
Okay, so at this point, I think we'd like to ask you to jump back out there onto your pencils and see if you can kind of give us an idea of where you are now. So we had a lot of people who were down feeling like, yeah, this is my first exploration, my first experience, and we're hoping that we see some growth, as we would love to see with our students. So where are you guys? I'm excited by the fact that no one's in the 0 category anymore. That looks really good. I'm really encouraged by the fact that I'm seeing lots of people marking in 3 that they're feeling more confident about what the standards are at their particular grade level. All right. Looks good. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and move on, and I think we're switching back over to Susan, so I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic and pass it back to you, Susan.
Okay. So while we wrap up, I just want to talk about a couple of the things that we alluded to at the beginning of the seminar. One is that when you have students working with these concepts about impacts on the environment and the state of the environment and climate change, that can be an emotionally challenging thing for students, especially at younger levels. And one of the strategies that you use about this is something that we've been talking about throughout, which is to focus not you don't have to sugarcoat things. You're not sugarcoating things, but have people working with solutions and problem solving and working within their own communities, whether that be the school community, the classroom community, whatever it is. Another thing that people have alluded to is the fact that there's controversy about the idea of human impact on the environment. The reasons for that, there are many reasons for that, but as a rule, publicly controversial science topics have to do with things that have implications for human ways of life, our economy, anything like that. So that's what gets more attention and more interest socially. There's a number of different strategies that teachers I work with use to handle this. One of the things is that they don't start out talking about hot button topics, using hot trigger words, kind of ease into the human impacts part by learning about our systems, and then once students understand a little bit about it, then getting into, and humans are part of the system, and we also affect the system. But always using evidence and data, always focusing on how we know what we know. This isn't just something that's been made up by a few people. The other thing that people do is to rely on the standards. If your school or district or state has adopted the standards, then you can always, with parents, talk about, here is what I'm responsible for teaching, and this is what I'm doing. Hopefully you have administrative support that you can rely on, that you're getting into these areas, but you know, these are very important things for everyone to understand, so it's an opportunity. Even that said, you need to be concerned about helping students get the skills they need to make decisions versus simply being doing advocacy. The difference here has to do with the extent to which students are using data, doing analysis, making decisions about actions that they or communities should be taking. And it's all based on data and evidence. It's not the teacher saying, and here's what we need to do about it. That's the difference. Providing information and providing skills to equip students for whatever decisions they have to make now and into the future versus telling students, here's what you think and here's what you'll do. That's the inappropriate thing to do. The appropriate thing to do is help them learn that. So I was just curious, we have another one of those virtual pencil slides. I'd like to know which of these strategies do you use? So these are some of the strategies we've talked about. Which things do you do in your classroom to mitigate some of these issues? Yeah, I've seen teachers talk about ocean currents, I talk about ocean change, and then we get into sea level rise. Focus on problem solving, use evidence and data. Of course, science class. Evidence and data is where it's at. Okay. Wow. So not a lot of people counting on the standards and support from administrators. Another thing I often, it's great if you have that support. Another thing I tell people about when I'm working with teachers who are concerned about this is maybe make sure that your administrators know about what you're doing before you do it. You don't want the first time they hear about it to be from a parent who's concerned about it. Make sure that your administrators are aware of the state of the evidence and the state of the science, or at least your science chair, whoever, and then go from there. But everything else, I'm really happy to see the strategies. Oh, okay. I see Rhea is saying it's scary. This is really important. Most teachers do not get significant pushback. Most teachers find controversy which is easily handled just by good instructional practices, by looking at data, by being sensitive to community feelings, and by focusing on problem solving. So it's really quite rare for teachers to find controversy that shuts down instruction. So that's the good news. one thing that the Evolution Wars have done for us is teach us how to do instruction dealing with socially controversial issues. So with that, I'm really happy with what I've seen here. Oh, sad face in administrator support. Okay, so a lot of the resources that we've shown you have come from the CLEAN collection. This is a collection of climate and energy resources that have been reviewed by educators and also by scientists. And they've been reviewed by experts in that particular resource. So if it's a sea level resource, it's been looked at by a sea level scientist to make sure that it's accurate and current and appropriate. I neglected to put the URL on the slide. So I'm going to type that into the chat and also tell you about a couple of other links. Aida and I are both part of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. This is a education organization that's focused entirely on geosciences, and so there's a link there for you. I also want to let you know that there's a couple of webinars coming up through CIRES for teachers that are about severe weather. And if you're interested in that, please email me at susan.buhr@colorado.edu, and we'll put you on an email list to notify you when the registration is open. As part of those webinars, we'll be talking about both what's projected for different kinds of severe weather, which includes a lot of things, floods, blizzards, you name it, hurricanes, that sort of thing. And also, how do scientists go about attributing whether that weather is due to natural variability or how much of it is attributable to human activity. So if you want to know about that, email me. And with that, I'll just sum up and highlight that design and problem solving are central to these ideas. It's important both because those skills are important and because it helps students process what they're learning about the Earth system. This relevancy to humans breeds opportunity in that students are interested, but it also means that we have to be sensitive to the complexity. The thing to be asking yourself is, what do I have in my toolbox now? What in my curriculum can help me with these ideas now? And what can I add to that that's going to make it relevant for these ideas and for these performance expectations? So with that, I want to thank everybody for your attention and for your attendance, and point out that this very busy slide has all of the resources that we've been talking about. And
Susan, I'll just jump in and let everybody know that we'll push out a file now that has the link to everybody, or it's a PDF of the citations. So you'll be prompted to save this to your computer and have that. We'll also have this in the web seminar collection. And then we'll go ahead and turn it over to Ted to share our final resources.
Yes, just thanks again to Susan and Aida. That was, I think, an extremely useful presentation. Just going to point out a few other places here to get general information about the Next Generation Science Standards. So nextgenscience.org is the official site for the standards. You can also see NSTA's site, nsta.org/NGSS for more information. We've had a great discussion going on in the chat room tonight. You can also get involved in discussion forum in the Learning Center, or if you're an NSTA member, we have a member-only listserv about NGSS that you'd be encouraged to get involved in. Upcoming web seminars. We've just finished off our whole set of Earth Science, and starting in 2014, we'll have the Life Science up. We will have in just a couple days here where you can log on for those, or is it already up there? Great. And also we'll probably be doing a web seminar about assessment in January, because we'll have a new report from the National Academies coming out. You can find out a lot more about the practices, cross-cutting concepts, and the core ideas in our archives. pointed out too here, and journal articles have been done on a number of these different topics as well. I encourage you to take a look at those. Some books from the NSTA bookstore. We've talked about the framework and the standards themselves. The standards do exist in hard copy. You can get that from NSTA Press. We also have NSTA Reader's Guides to both books, and I want to highlight a new book that recently came out called Translating NGSS for Classroom Instruction that was written by Roger Bybee, and it gives some ideas about how to take NGSS and start working it into your classroom. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend the NGSS app, so you can always have the standards right at your fingertips when you want to and need to. And I'm going to be out in Denver, or maybe I'll run into Susan out there, and Aida out there. We're at area conference, and our national conference will be coming up in Boston in the spring. And with that, thank you again all for being here. Really thank Susan and Aida, who did, I think, a wonderful job of giving us a good sense of what can be a complex topic, but it's a really exciting topic, I think, for all of us. And with that, I'll, as always, pass things off to Bryn. Thank you so much, Bryn, and let you turn off the light.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ted. And I want to echo your appreciation for Susan and for Aida. Fantastic presentation tonight, and a great way to wrap up our fall series. So thank you all so much, and thank you to Ted as well. We do want to thank the sponsor of today's web seminar, the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Also wanted to thank the administration of NSTA for their support for web seminars. And just a reminder to everybody again about the web seminar collection, which has the PowerPoint slides, the web seminar archive as soon as we're wrapped up today, as well as additional great resources, including that list of citations that we pushed out to you, so you'll be able to access it there as well. I've put the link into our chat window. And just to wrap up, wanted to let everybody know that we do have some great web seminars coming up even before the holidays, so encourage you to register by going to learningcenter.nsta.org/webseminars. And thank you everyone for your participation today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.